32. Dominate while seeming to submit. The passive aggression strategy. Any attempt to bend people to your will is a form of aggression, and in a world where political considerations are paramount, the most effective form of aggression is the best hidden one. Aggression behind a compliant, even loving exterior. To follow the passive-aggressive strategy, you must seem to go along with people, offering no resistance. But actually, you dominate the situation. You are non-committal, even a little helpless, but that only means that everything revolves around you. Some people may sense what you are up to and get angry. Don't worry. Just make sure you have disguised your aggression enough that you can deny it exists. Do it right, and they will feel guilty for accusing you. Passive aggression is a popular strategy. You must learn how to defend yourself against the vast legions of passive-aggressive warriors who will assail you in your daily life. The Guilt Weapon. In December 1929, the group of Englishmen who governed India were feeling a little nervous. The Indian National Congress, the country's main independence movement, had just broken off talks over the proposal that Britain would gradually return autonomous rule to the subcontinent. Instead, the Congress was now calling for nothing less than immediate and total independence, and it had asked Mahatma Gandhi to lead a civil disobedience campaign to initiate this struggle. Gandhi, who had studied law in London years before, had invented a form of passive resistant protest in 1906 while working as a barrister in South Africa. In India, in the early 1920s, he had led civil disobedience campaigns against the British that had created quite a stir, had landed him in prison, and had made him the most revered man in the country. For the British, dealing with him was never easy. Despite his frail appearance, he was uncompromising and relentless. Although Gandhi believed in and practiced a rigorous form of nonviolence, the colonial officers of the British Raj were fearful. At a time when the English economy was weak, they imagined him organizing a boycott of British goods, not to mention mass demonstrations in the streets of India's cities, a police nightmare. The man in charge of the Raj's strategy in combating the independence movement was the Viceroy of India, Lord Edward Irwin. Although Irwin admired Gandhi personally, he had decided to respond to him rapidly and with force. He could not let the situation get out of hand. He waited anxiously to see what Gandhi would do. The weeks went by, and finally, on March 2nd, Irwin received a letter from Gandhi, rather touching in its honesty, that revealed the details of the civil disobedience campaign he was about to launch. It was to be a protest against the salt tax. The British held a monopoly on India's production of salt, even though it could easily be gathered by anyone on the coast. They also levied a rather high tax on it. This was quite a burden for the poorest of the poor in India, for whom salt was their only condiment. Gandhi planned to lead a march of his followers from his ashram near Bombay, present-day Mumbai, to the coastal town of Dandi, where he would gather sea salt left on the shore by the waves and encourage Indians everywhere to do the same. All this could be prevented, he wrote to Irwin, if the Viceroy would immediately repeal the salt tax. Irwin read this letter with a sense of relief. He imagined the 60-year-old Gandhi, rather fragile and leaning on a bamboo cane, leading his ragtag followers from his ashram, fewer than 80 people, on a 200-mile march to the sea, where he would gather some salt from the sands. Compared to what Irwin and his staff had been expecting, the protest seemed almost ludicrously small in scale. What was Gandhi thinking? Had he lost touch with reality? Even some members of the Indian National Congress were deeply disappointed by his choice of protest. In any event, Irwin had to rethink his strategy. It simply would not do to harass or arrest this saintly old man and his followers, many of them women. That would look very bad. It would be better to leave him alone, avoiding the appearance of a heavy-handed response and letting the crisis play out and die down. In the end, the ineffectiveness of this campaign would somewhat discredit Gandhi, breaking his spell over the Indian masses. The independence movement might fracture or at least lose some momentum, leaving England in a stronger position in the long run. As Irwin watched Gandhi's preparations for the march, he became still more convinced that he had chosen the right strategy. Gandhi was framing the event as almost religious in quality, like Lord Buddha's famous march to attain divine wisdom, or Lord Rama's retreat in the Ramayana. His language became increasingly apocalyptic. We are entering upon a life-and-death struggle, a holy war. This seemed to resonate with the poor, who began to flock to Gandhi's ashram to hear him speak. He called in film crews from all over the world to record the march, as if it were a momentous historical event. Irwin himself was a religious man and saw himself as the representative of a God-fearing, civilized nation. It would redound to England's credit to be seen to leave this saintly man untouched on his procession to the sea. Gandhi and his followers left their ashram on March 12, 1930. As the group passed from village to village, their ranks began to swell. With each passing day, Gandhi was bolder. He called on students throughout India to leave their studies and join him in the march. Thousands responded. Large crowds gathered along the way to see him pass. His speeches to them grew more and more inflammatory. He seemed to be trying to bait the English into arresting him. On April 6th, he had led his followers into the sea to purify themselves, then collected some salt from the shore. Word quickly spread throughout India that Gandhi had broken the salt law. Irwin followed these events with increasing alarm. It dawned on him that Gandhi had tricked him. Instead of responding quickly and decisively to this seemingly innocent march to the sea, the viceroy had left Gandhi alone, allowing the march to gain momentum. The religious symbolism that seemed so harmless had stirred the masses, and the salt issue had somehow become a lightning rod for disaffection with English policy. Gandhi had shrewdly chosen an issue that the English would not recognize as threatening, but that would resonate with Indians. Had Irwin responded by arresting Gandhi immediately, the whole thing might have died down. Now it was too late. To arrest him at this point would only add fuel to the fire. Yet to leave him alone would show weakness and cede him the initiative. Meanwhile, nonviolent demonstrations were breaking out in cities and villages all over India, and to respond to them with violence would only make the demonstrators more sympathetic to moderate Indians. Whatever Irwin did, it seemed, would make things worse. And so he fretted, held endless meetings, and did nothing. In the days to come, the cause rippled outward. Thousands of Indians traveled to India's coasts to collect salt, as Gandhi had. Large cities saw mass demonstrations in which this illegal salt was given away or sold at a minimal price. One form of nonviolent protest cascaded into another, a Congress-led boycott of British goods, for one. Finally, on Irwin's orders, the British began to respond to the demonstrations with force. And on May 4th, they arrested Gandhi and took him to prison, where he would stay for 9 months without trial. Gandhi's arrest sparked a conflagration of protest. On May 21st, a group of 2,500 Indians marched peacefully on the government's Dharasana salt works, which was defended by armed Indian constables and British officers. When the marchers advanced on the factory, they were struck down with steel-plated clubs. Instructed in Gandhi's methods of nonviolence, the demonstrators made no attempt to defend themselves, simply submitting to the blows that rained down on them. Those who had not been hit continued to march until almost every last one had been clubbed. It was a nauseating scene that got a great deal of play in the press. Similar incidents all over India helped to destroy the last sentimental attachment any Indian still had toward England. To end this spiraling unrest, Irwin was finally forced to negotiate with Gandhi, and on several issues to give ground, an unprecedented event for an English imperialist viceroy. Although the end of the Raj would take several years, the Salt March would prove to be the beginning of the end, and in 1947 the English finally left India without a fight. Interpretation. Gandhi was a deceptively clever strategist whose frail, even saintly appearance constantly misled his adversaries into underestimating him. The key to any successful strategy is to know both one's enemy and oneself, and Gandhi, educated in London, understood the English well. He judged them to be essentially liberal people who saw themselves as upholding traditions of political freedom and civilized behavior. This self-image, though riddled with contradictions, as indicated by their sometimes brutal behavior in their colonies, was deeply important to the English. Many people today are as ambivalent as the English were about having power and authority. They need power to survive, yet at the same time, they have an equally great need to believe in their own goodness. In this context, to fight people with any kind of violence makes you look aggressive and ugly. And if they are stronger than you are, in effect you are playing into their hands, justifying a heavy-handed response from them. Instead, it is the height of strategic wisdom to prey upon people's latent guilt and liberal ambivalence by making yourself look benign, gentle, even passive. That will disarm them and get past their defenses. If you take action to challenge and resist them, you must do it morally, righteously, peacefully. If they cannot help themselves and respond with force, they will look and feel bad. If they hesitate, you have the upper hand and an opening to determine the whole dynamic of the war. It is almost impossible to fight people who throw up their hands and do not resist in the usual aggressive way. It is completely confusing and disabling. Operating in this way, you inflict guilt as if it were a kind of weapon. In a political world, your passive, moralistic resistance will paralyze the enemy. Keys to warfare. There are two kinds of passive aggression. The first is conscious strategy. The second is a semi-conscious or even unconscious behavior that people use all the time in the petty and not-so-petty matters of daily life. You may be tempted to forgive this second passive-aggressive type, who seems unaware of the effects of his or her actions or helpless to stop. But people often understand what they are doing far better than you imagine, and you are more than likely being taken in by their friendly and helpless exterior. We are generally too lenient with this second variety. The key to using passive aggression as a conscious, positive strategy is the front you present to your enemies. They must never be able to detect the sullen, defiant thoughts that are going on inside of you. In 1802, what today is Haiti was a French possession riven by a revolt of the country's black slaves under the leadership of Toussaint Louverture. That year, an army sent by Napoleon to crush the rebellion managed to seize Toussaint through treachery and ship him off to France, where he would eventually die in prison. Among Toussaint's most decorated generals was a man named Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who now surrendered to the French and even served in their army, helping them to put down isolated pockets of revolt and winning from them much appreciation. But it was all a ploy. As Dessalines squashed these remnants of the rebellion, he would hand over the weapons he captured to the French, but secretly. He always kept some of them back, stashing them away until he had quite a large armory. Meanwhile, he built up and trained a new rebel army in the remote areas where his assignment led him. Then, choosing a moment when an outbreak of yellow fever had decimated the French army, he resumed hostilities. Within a few years, he had defeated the French and liberated Haiti for good from colonial control. Dessalines' use of passive aggression has deep roots in military strategy, in what can be called the false surrender. In war, your enemies can never read your thoughts. They must make your appearance their guide, reading the signs you give off to decipher what you are thinking and planning. Meanwhile, the surrender of an army tends to be followed by a great flood of emotion and a lowering of everyone's guard. The victor will keep an eye on the beaten troops, but, exhausted by the effort it took to win, will be hugely tempted to be less wary than before. A clever strategist, then, may falsely surrender, announce that he is defeated in body and spirit. Seeing no indication otherwise, and unable to read his mind, the enemy is likely to take his submission at face value. Now the false surrenderer has time and space to plot new hostilities. In war, as in life, the false surrender depends on the seamless appearance of submission. Dessalines did not just give in, he actively served his former enemies. To make this work, you must do likewise, play up your weakness, your crushed spirit, your desire to be friends, an emotional ploy with great power to distract. You must also be something of an actor. Any sign of ambivalence will ruin the effect. Passive aggression is so common in daily life that you have to know how to play defense as well as offense. By all means, use the strategy yourself. It is too effective to drop from your armory. But you must also know how to deal with those semi-conscious passive-aggressive types so prevalent in the modern world, recognizing what they are up to before they get under your skin, and being able to defend yourself against this strange form of attack. Most often, their behavior is relatively harmless. Perhaps they are chronically late, or make flattering comments that hide a sarcastic sting, or offer help but never follow through. These common tactics are best ignored. Just let them wash over you as part of the current of modern life, and never take them personally. You have more important battles to fight. There are, however, stronger, more harmful versions of passive aggression, acts of sabotage that do real damage. A colleague is warm to your face, but says things behind your back that cause you problems. You let someone into your life who proceeds to steal something valuable of yours. An employee takes on an important job for you, but does it slowly and badly. These types do harm, but are excellent at avoiding any kind of blame. Their modus operandi is to create enough doubt that they were the ones who did the aggressive act. It is never their fault. Somehow they are innocent bystanders, helpless, the real victims in the whole dynamic. Their denials of responsibility are confusing. You suspect they have done something, but you cannot prove it, or worse, if they are really skillful, you feel guilty for even thinking them at fault. And if in your frustration you lash out at them, you pay a high price. They will focus attention on your angry, aggressive response, your overreaction, distracting your thoughts from the passive-aggressive maneuvers that got you so irritated in the first place. The guilt you feel is a sign of the power they have over you. Indeed, you can virtually recognize the harmful variety of passive aggression by the strength of emotions it churns up in you. Not superficial annoyance, but confusion, paranoia, insecurity, and anger. To defeat the passive-aggressive warrior, you must first work on yourself. This means being acutely aware of the blame-shifting tactic as it happens. Squash any feelings of guilt it might begin to make you feel. These types can be very ingratiating, using flattery to draw you into their web, preying on your insecurities. It is often your own weakness that sucks you into the passive-aggressive dynamic. Be alert to this. Second, once you realize you are dealing with the dangerous variety, the smartest move is to disengage. At best, to get the person out of your life, or at the least, to not flare up and cause a scene, all of which plays into his hands. You need to stay calm. If it happens to be a partner in a relationship in which you cannot disengage, the only solution is to find a way to make the person feel comfortable in expressing any negative feelings toward you and encouraging it. This may be hard to take initially, but it may diffuse his or her need to be underhanded. and open criticisms are easier to deal with than covert sabotage. The most effective counter-strategy with the passive-aggressive is often to be subtle and underhanded right back at them, neutralizing their powers. You can also try this with the less harmful types, the ones who are chronically late, for instance. Giving them a taste of their own medicine may open their eyes to the irritating effects of their behavior. In any event, you must never leave the passive-aggressive time and space in which to operate. Let them take root, and they will find all kinds of sly ways to pull you here and there. Your best defense is to be sensitive to any passive-aggressive manifestations in those around you, and to keep your mind as free as possible from their insidious influence. Reversal. The reversal of passive aggression is aggressive passivity, presenting an apparently hostile face while inwardly staying calm and taking no unfriendly action. The purpose here is intimidation. Perhaps you know you are the weaker of the two sides, and hope to discourage your enemies from attacking you by presenting a blustery front. Taken in by your appearance, they will find it hard to believe that you do not intend to do anything. In general, presenting yourself as the opposite of what you really are and intend can be a useful way of disguising your strategies.